I think Mike embodies what I have found in the hydrocephalus research. Oh, Mike, thank you. Mike embodied in everything he said what I have found in hydrocephalus research. It's been an amazing 8 years since I transitioned from renal physiology. And it's amazing how much the research has grown over that time. From a few labs doing this to a multitude of labs, and these are interconnected labs. Many of us know each other's students. We see graduate students going to other people's labs as postdocs and then on to their junior faculty positions. It is a close-knit field. It's been quite an honor to be part of that. And it's also an honor now to actually introduce the Finlayson family. 3 members are here, Pam, Peter, and Grant. There is another member, Sam, who couldn't join us today. But Pam is going to tell us this family story, but I'm going to spoil it a little bit. Sorry. Can I talk about Team Hydro just a little bit? Okay. Okay, I don't want to spoil the point. Okay. No, I don't want to spoil your story. I haven't seen your slides. They are raising money for hydrocephalus research and have been for a very long period of time. They funded the pilot project that allowed me to get into this field. And I've known them ever since. So the way that they raise money is that they support a swim because they're big swimmers. In fact, I understand Peter's picture is over in the NFL, the Sports Hall of Fame, as a water polo player. He didn't know that. He just discovered it on this trip. So they set up a number of different swims, but the one that is most remarkable is the Alcatraz swim. So yeah, you too can do this swim, I understand. I'm looking at the young people who could do this swim. Every year they swim from Alcatraz to the mainland to raise money for hydrocephalus research. I thought that couldn't be done. I remember hearing about Alcatraz as an island that you put a prison on because nobody could get off of it. Well, apparently you can, under the right circumstances, make that swim, and they haven't lost anybody yet. So I won't take up any more time. I'd like to introduce Pam as the speaker for the family. And afterwards, I encourage you to talk to all 3 members of the family. Do you want to use this or the, which are you more comfortable with?
Yeah, I think I'm going to give it a try. Anyway, thank you so much, Bonnie. My family and I couldn't be more thrilled or excited by the opening of this amazing center. We could also not be more grateful for the incredible and groundbreaking work of Dr. Blazer Yost that has allowed this important place of research and learning to come to fruition. As folks who first met this brilliant researcher, I'm going to embarrass you now a little bit too, now also considered a dear friend, when she was just beginning her first foray into hydrocephalus research. We have long been amazed by her keen intellect, her determination, and especially her willingness to attempt a journey down an unpaved road. Yet despite already being aware of all this woman is capable of accomplishing, we could not be more moved or excited by what we've also seen here today. Clearly, the team with which Bonnie surrounds herself, as well as those who came here today or are listening online, because of your own interest and work regarding hydrocephalus, are beyond incredible too. Thank you all. My family and I also want to express how very honored and touched we are that Dr. Blazer Yost and Dean DeTusa asked us to share our daughter and sister's experience with hydrocephalus. I hope that as I do, it will not only give you reason to pay attention to what Dr. Williams just said and listen to all the opportunities available in this field, but also to maybe, again, for a moment, make it personal and remind you of the people for whom your efforts and work and thought and caring will really make a lifelong difference. Oops, did I already mess it up? Wait. I think I pushed the wrong side. No, let me just, yeah. There we go. This was Kate. And she passed away from complications of hydrocephalus at the age of 26. She would be very surprised and yet also very pleased, I think, at the idea that her life, in its turn, might ultimately, in a small way, contribute to improving the fate of others. Her hydro family, as she used to say. Our Kate was an inspiration. Sadly, her life was also a powerful demonstration of the pressing need for increased and continued hydrocephalus research. For some reason, it's not flipping for me. Should I go here? This one? Should I just do this one? No. Just the arrow. Okay. I'm sorry, everyone. Unlike most parents whose child is diagnosed with hydrocephalus, I had heard of the condition before Kate was born. In college, I had volunteered teaching adaptive aquatics, swimming for people with mental and physical disabilities. My very first student was a little boy, about 3, who had untreated hydrocephalus. Scotty was blind, his head so large and out of proportion with his small frame that he couldn't even hold it up. I loved that sweet little boy. When he died a year later, I hoped never to encounter hydrocephalus again. Fast forward, I'm married, living in Boston, expecting my second child. At 25 weeks gestation, my water breaks unexpectedly. 10 days later, Kate is born 3.5 months early. Weighing barely 2 pounds, she was very tiny and very sick. We were told to prepare for her death. Against all odds, somehow, however, she miraculously survived the first couple of days. But before we could breathe a sigh of relief, she suffered a severe brain hemorrhage. Left grade 4, right grade 3. The medical staff, which had already been less than encouraging, went from less than to not at all. We were told that even if Kate survived, she would never walk or talk or develop normally. Back in those days, they used words to describe her like train wreck and vegetable. But when I looked at my daughter, despite the fact that she was lying in a frightening tangle of tubes and wires, in her eyes, I saw a spark, an unmistakable light saying, "I'm still in here. Don't stop trying." And so we kept our hope alive. But as a few weeks passed, Kate stalled. She grew more lethargic. Her vital signs tanked. As I sat by her bedside, her head began to enlarge from 1 hour to the next. Imaging was done. Her head was full of fluid, her sweet brain crushed up against the inside of her skull. The doctors and nurses were clearly worried. I heard a term I hadn't heard in some years: hydrocephalus. My thoughts, of course, immediately turned to Scotty, his physical challenges, his early death. Would this now be the fate of my precious little girl? But as pressure climbed in Kate's brain, the doctor said something could be done. They could place a catheter in the ventricles of her brain to drain the excess fluid, something called a shunt. Brain surgery. It seemed scary, but as Kate deteriorated, a shunt seemed like a miracle. They could place a catheter in the ventricles of her brain. Kate would have a chance with this thing called hydrocephalus. Still, she would be shunt dependent for life. A shunt was placed. Kate's brain popped back. and her condition stabilized. Miracle. We were grateful and full of hope when we finally brought our little girl home. Despite the gloomy predictions for her future, Kate began to grow into an adorable little girl who loved life. In the next 10 years, she needed only one shunt revision. That's not to say there weren't challenges. We worked with Kate every day to overcome learning and language delays. Since one side of her body didn't work as well as the other, we started her swimming as therapy because it forced her to use both sides equally. Kate loved the water. At first, she was like a boat with one oar and only went in circles. But she kept trying and working. And eventually, the skinny little girl with bifocals and a brain shunt became a champion swimmer. To our amazement, most of her records still stand. And at her swim club in Maryland, Kate's dedication and perseverance in spite of adversity remains somewhat of a legend. In fact, her love for swimming is one of the reasons why our family takes pleasure in earning funds for research through swimming-related events. And wonderfully, the Little Falls swim team in Bethesda, Maryland, has joined Team Hydro and often holds a yearly swim for hydrocephalus research, raising much-needed funds for the condition that took the life of a teammate. Kate's perseverance paid off in other aspects of her life, too. She became a good student, an avid reader, a gifted writer. Most importantly, Kate was a happy, loving girl, a joy to be around. We decided then that hydrocephalus perhaps was not so bad after all. But when Kate turned 11, everything changed. Her shunt, a dream come true for a lifetime, for a decade, became the nightmare of her existence for the next 15 years. Kate began having debilitating headaches. Sure enough, shunt failure. Surgery to remove the old shunt caused another brain hemorrhage, creating another area of the brain that would not drain on its own. An additional catheter was placed, but this caused overdrainage of the fluid. Another surgery for a different valve was needed. Just when this series of complications seemed finally over, a life-threatening surgery-related infection struck. The dynamics in Kate's brain changed further, making her hydrocephalus forevermore incredibly difficult to manage. We were beginning to really not like shunts. Don't get me wrong. In many ways, shunts are wonderful. When working, they keep people alive. But as we've heard today, they're horribly flawed. They are notoriously prone to problems and failures. Shunts can clog, break, fall apart, get infected. Valves can over or under drain. Catheters can corrode, disconnect, erode through the skin, even manage to tie themselves in knots internally in the peritoneal cavity. Revision surgeries can cause seizures, motor issues, strokes. We know because during her lifetime, every single one of those complications and a whole lot more happened to our daughter, Kate. Each one required more brain surgery and days, weeks, or even months in the hospital. Shunts can fail quickly. One day, Kate was happy and energetic all morning, but just after lunch, I found her lying on the couch looking tired. "Are you okay?" I said. "Well, Mom, to be honest, I have a headache, and I think I may be the bad kind of sleepy." To my mommy ears, bad kind of sleepy did not sound good. Sure enough, an hour and a half later, Kate was being wheeled into the OR, the pressure in her brain so great we couldn't wake her up at all. Yet no one seemed to understand the science behind these failures and complications, much less what to do about them. So often the answer to Kate's questions regarding what was happening to her was, "We don't know. We just don't understand." Or worst of all, we really are not sure what to do next. The problem is, until we understand what is going on with hydrocephalus and find better treatments, or even better, how to prevent hydrocephalus from developing in the first place, people like Kate will continue to suffer and die. Living with the uncertainty of a relatively unknown, incurable condition is not easy, and yet it forced in Kate a maturity and compassion beyond her years. We were in pre-op. Kate was about to have a particularly dangerous surgery. Her calm demeanor belied the fact that she understood the gravity of the situation. She took my hand and said, "Mom, I'm a bit more nervous today than usual." She paused. "When Dr. X looks at me, I see fear in his eyes." She then very calmly added, "If things don't go well today, will you please tell him it's okay, it didn't work?" There was Kate, just 14 years old, seeking to comfort her beloved neurosurgeon because she knew her case was pushing the limits of even his skilled expertise. It broke my heart. Kate survived complication after complication all through her teens. She survived things like this. Her shunts failed so frequently, attending regular school was impossible. She had to stop swimming, never made it to prom, missed family reunions and vacations. Despite dozens of surgeries and the added isolation of independent study, through sheer determination, Kate graduated high school on time. She was admitted to college as an honor student, where she hoped to fulfill her dream of becoming a nurse. Kate said she couldn't imagine helping others as she had been helped. Sadly, her studies and dreams were cut short by surgery after surgery due to her shunts. In her early 20s, Kate's symptoms grew even more difficult. She was in constant pain. Her heart, which, as you know, is controlled by the brain, acted up. If she remained upright too long, she would suddenly fall unconscious into a coma. It seemed clear she was suffering from an internal leak of some sort, causing her brainstem to shift downward, but imaging technology could not find it, and blind attempts at blood patches failed. As an adult, Kate had aged out of her children's hospital and pediatric neurosurgeon. We needed to find an adult neurosurgeon who was willing to take on such complex hydrocephalus, not an easy task. We were finally referred to a doctor in another state. Kate and I traveled expecting to be gone a couple of weeks. I'd remain for over a year and a half. Kate would never return home. The first surgery was simple, a valve change, but copious amount of fluid started leaking from the incision. A terrible infection developed. Treatment caused another stroke, a big one. More surgeries, more changes to her brain. She began developing lockulated areas within her ventricles. And even if they appeared small, it turned out that unless they were individually shunted, she would become symptomatic, as in she'd go into a coma. Soon she needed 5 catheters draining well to remain conscious. But her CSF began generating an odd spider web-like substance which kept clogging them up. But worse than all that, they could not stop the leaks. Kate's tipping point became very narrow, an extra 3 to 5 cc's. That's about a teaspoon of fluid in her head put her into a deep coma. The fact that the brain can be so resilient and yet so fragile proved as difficult as it was amazing. Still, Kate's brain just didn't make sense with regard to current knowledge of how the brain and CSF system supposedly works. What happened next was no less than horrific. For a period of about 4 months, Kate was operated on just about every other day. She'd return to the ICU from surgery awake, relieved and talking, only to have her shunts fail again within hours. Back in a coma, she'd return to the OR. The cycle would then repeat. Kate was devastated physically. She lost most of her vision and the use of her left side. Her right side lost function too. She could not tolerate sitting up. The skin on her head became so fragile it would tear like tissue paper if it even touched her pillow. Her pain was intense. As complications continued to mount, a solution seemed nowhere in sight. Her doctor was clearly frustrated. Kate's brain was not following his theories regarding hydrocephalus in the brain. After months of effort, he seemed kind of relieved to leave town for the holidays. In an unexpected turn of fate, the holiday would bring new hope. We met a bright young doctor covering Kate's case, known to think outside the box. He studied her case, listened carefully to our observations, asked some great questions. He conceived and proposed a novel solution, a new system designed to force CSF through the shunt before it could leak out elsewhere. but this shunt would need to be pumped manually. He offered no guarantees, but Kate and our family, who would need to pump the shunt, decided to try. Kate was determined. We were desperate. The novel system was jury-rigged together and implanted. The doctor provided a general calculation on how much we needed to pump the shunt, but warned us not to do it too much or the ventricles would collapse and clog the catheters. So back in the ICU, her nurse and I started slowly. First, we pumped her enough to pull her out of a coma. Then we pumped her enough to keep her out. Eventually, we found the shunt needed to be pumped 70 times every 15 minutes around the clock. But you know what? The system worked. For the first time in months, Kate became more stable. The external leaking began to slow almost immediately. Her headaches diminished to a stop. Kate and all of us were so excited. We celebrated a joyful Christmas in that ICU. Kate had a long road ahead of her and was still shunt dependent, still requiring all 5 catheters. But buoyed by new possibilities, she was ready to conquer the rehabilitation she faced. The next part of the story is difficult to tell. The first neurosurgeon returned from vacation. He heard about the newly invented system and the pumping it required. We were surprised to learn he didn't like the idea. We excitedly told him how much better Kate was doing. She had stopped needing surgery. The leaks were healing. He was skeptical. When he came to see Kate, she was resting, but he must have assumed she was back in another coma because right there he suggested we stop pumping and just give up. We were confused. Kate was finally improving. Why would we stop now? He said the pumping was not sustainable. The doctor continued, "It won't work. I recommend you just say goodbye to her and stop. Just let her know, go. She won't know." Grant and I and the nurses in the room didn't know what to say. It was Kate herself who first found words. Though lying in bed silently with her eyes closed this whole time, Kate opened her eyes and said in a quiet but firm and pleading voice, "No, don't not try." Tears began to roll down her cheeks. "Please, don't not try." Kate wanted to live. Despite having endured so much, despite facing a long road ahead, Kate was not ready to give up. Kate wanted to try. We continued to pump her shunt. No more comas. The leaks healed. As they did, she required less pumping. Eventually, the system drained on her own. Her headaches were gone. The problem that brought her to the hospital had been solved. In the next 10 months, Kate joyfully accomplished a lot. She worked hard to learn to sit up unaided, then to walk again with aid. She served others by making care packages for her physical therapy and allowed doctors to study her unusual case. She got to know her future sister-in-law, and albeit in a wheelchair, Kate danced with her brother on his wedding day. And although she was unlikely aware of this, she continued to teach and inspire her family, friends, and medical staff about strength, courage, hope, and love. Most importantly, Kate remained grateful for every day she was alive, as did we. For our family, an important takeaway from Kate's life is recognizing how transformative it is when someone asks the right questions needed to formulate and attempt a new solution. We tried, and it worked. Tragically, this solution came too late. A powerful infection reemerged in her shunts. This time, even Kate knew it could not be stopped. But Kate's death drove our lesson home. We can't be satisfied with the way things are. We must keep fighting this thing called hydrocephalus. Despite progress in recent years, research is still sorely lacking, and the current treatments, all of which require brain surgery, are simply not good enough. No matter how well a shunt works on a given day, or even on occasion for a relatively carefree decade, without the generation of new understanding and treatments, shunts will remain what they are, ticking time bombs of potential disaster. With no treatment, Sweet Scotty had no chance. Our Kate had access to dedicated professionals and incredible medical care. Yet, because understanding of and treatments for hydrocephalus remained outdated and lacking, she still suffered unimaginably. Despite so many surgeries, despite all she endured and survived, in the end, hydrocephalus stole her life. We need to do better. We have to try. It's easy to say no one should suffer as Kate did. It will be harder to ensure no one must. We need more and continued research. We need real understanding of how and why hydrocephalus develops. It's worth the effort. It won't be easy. We need new solutions. We need a cure. Or better yet, imagine a world where we can prevent this devastating condition from ever developing at all. It may be too late for Kate, but the situation is urgent for the millions throughout the world still suffering with hydrocephalus and those yet to be diagnosed. It won't be easy. To keep this cause moving forward, it will take commitment and determination and perseverance, the very things we demand of hydrocephalus patients every single day. It's worth the effort. I still miss Kate. In all those days and nights we spent together, she became my sister and my best friend. She would be so pleased and amazed by this incredible center and by the research that has been presented here today. Kate would have certainly been first in line to thank each of you for your willingness to use your incredible brains to think, hypothesize, experiment, and study in an effort to help others. I haven't spoken much about our Team Hydro effort, the one where I allowed my kids to convince me about a dozen years ago that I could swim in the freezing cold water from Alcatraz Island to San Francisco or across the Boston Harbor to raise awareness and funds for hydrocephalus research. Perhaps I should note that the boys first decided to raise funds while Kate was in ICU after a particularly horrible surgery. Once again, her brain and CSF system were responding in confounding ways. No one understood why or how. The docs were as perplexed as we were by the disturbing scans and her alarming clinical state. I will never forget the boys, just college students themselves, sitting in the ICU with laptops on, desperately searching the web, hoping to find answers. We knew then that more research had to be done. So the boys, along with just a couple friends, decided to swim in an effort to raise research funds. The idea seemed novel and even a bit crazy. But luckily, novel and a bit crazy sometimes pays off. Donations from this, one of our earlier swims, funded Bonnie's first hydrocephalus project through the Hydrocephalus Association's Innovator Award program, and another one more recently. Thanks to Bonnie, you don't have to see that being a little bit crazy sometimes pays off big time. And so we continue to swim, making the crossing from Alcatraz to San Francisco each summer. In that treacherous and freezing cold bay, even me, now firmly in my Medicare years. That said, I share a confession with you now. I was never a competitive swimmer, and I hate being cold. Every time I step up to start one of those swims, I look out at the expanse of churning, frigid, marine animal-filled water before me, and my first thought is to turn and run. But it's then I hear a sweet and familiar, but desperately pleading voice in my head. Don't not try. Please don't not try. It's then I remember why I swim. It's then I remember why promoting hydrocephalus awareness and research is so very important. It's then I remember that as an individual, a family, and a community such as this, Until a cure is found for this difficult and life-threatening condition, we can't not try. And thanks to all of you, we won't stop. Thank you so much. Our daughter and sister Kate is smiling for sure.